Cool, guys. So I think we'll continue talking about the LF, but we also want to make sure we discuss LED stuff for a minute. So I think we'll begin the next portion of the conversation to discuss lighting. I think what I kind of want to do before we do that is just an example of how personally LED technology has helped me in the past, is to show a quick clip from Moonlight. It's the scene in which there's this pink light behind the mother character in the film. Has everybody seen the movie? Not everybody, but I'm assuming hopefully lots of people have seen the film, or maybe some people. I'll just talk through it a little bit. The reason why I mention it is because this color pink, I know it's been discussed a lot, and people seem to think the choice is sort of stylistic and maybe a little strange. It's a choice that came about like really quickly. This color pink and this choice was not discussed in pre-production. It was not discussed, on the day. Literally, I remember distinctly setting this shot particularly up, and Barry, the director, and myself standing behind the camera, and we had set up a RGB LED light in the bedroom that you see in the background, and our gaffer on a little board, not so dissimilar from what was shown earlier, obviously. The one today looks quite sophisticated and quite interesting, but something quite similar. And I just referenced that because to me, this is the power of and the strength and what I love so much about the new technologies. It allows sort of decisions like that to come very quickly, which when you have such speed in your creative process, things I find for me, can become very personal choices, very specific choices, and happen, with gut instinctual level processes. If there's no way, for example, in 6 weeks earlier that I could have, at least me personally, maybe a different DP could, but I could have thought that pink would have been appropriate. That was a reaction to the color of the walls, that was a reaction to the color of the wardrobe, that was a reaction to sort of the depth of the scene. And this is, at least for me, why I love this new technology, because I work with Barry so much so on a gut level. We know each other for a long time. We have a lot of sort of, similar sort of languages that we speak, because we sort of learned the craft together and things like this. So lots of our decision-making happens on the set. And as I referenced earlier, we're very reactionary filmmakers. We react to our environment as opposed to dictate it. And so, this pink light, for example, I think is a great example of sort of like why I think that works. That's sort of the power of it anyway. I think what we'll do now is do a quick lighting change from a little bit of a day bar scene to a night bar scene. Let's find a wide position. I think what we're going to show here, we'll set the wide up real quickly, and just to give our gaffer Bernhardt a heart attack, we'll show him, we'll see how fast he can go from day to night with LED. This is still the 95, yeah? Okay, cool. And this is something that, a project that, maybe not everyone here has seen, but I did a TV pilot last year where I had, a soundstage rigged with a bunch of LED stuff, and we were able to go from, a day interior to a night interior, like within 10 seconds, which is, again, like another powerful tool that this stuff happens to have in it. It's a real blessing to be a cinematographer these days, and something that I feel quite lucky to be beginning my career in this moment. Here we are. That was fast. He's good. He's not good? He's good. Anyway, I think you sort of just saw it. This is sort of, I think, my favorite thing about LED is just how fast you make choices. And going back again, I'll just repeat myself one more time. It's through that quickness and that speed that you can make this sort of very emotional level choices as opposed to more conceptual ones that you plan ahead. I love being, loose and on the fly and things like that, and so LED is a great example of that. Are you ready for some color changes? I hope so. Okay, cool. Let's do this. I think let's set up a shot, that sort of two-shot we started with. And what I'd like to do is just chat real quick about emotional value of color. So these overheads, these can change, yeah? Only blue and yeah, tungsten daylight. Let's go to a daylight temperature. Let's go to 56 and present just, I don't know, just some different colors. Let's talk about color for a second. Let's see how it goes. And the other one too, please. the other softbox. So when I'm working, mostly, I'm largely making choices from like a emotional level, and I think it's really evident clearly. All of a sudden, it's funny. Probably should have started with this in terms of the beginning of my scene, talking about these two not having a good time together. I'm already feeling a little bit more appropriate to that emotional core. So. It's funny, I keep saying the same thing again, but this is how quickly this happens and how fast. I can see Barry would be very happy right now, for example. I don't know that he'd be as happy before, but now he's quite happy, I think, Barry, in regards to some of the different color temperatures. Let's come, you know what we should do? I'd love to sort of bring that other one back around. Let's find just a different, another, yeah, maybe over the camera a little bit is better. Yeah. Yeah, maybe to your left a little bit more. We have one more clip from Moonlight, don't we? I think it's number 3. I wanted to show that just in regards to 2 things, because one is an aside, but the first thing is just tone and how that green, I think for me has a great value of what brought that emotional sort of sensibility to that scene. Traditionally, I think it's we're in a place where we're very open now. I think due to a lot of factors, how music videos have changed our visual language, how commercials have changed our visual language. Still photography, fashion photography, all these different things I find have a great deal of influence on me. I think if you showed that scene maybe 15 years ago, even 5 years ago maybe, it would look shocking. But this kind of green, especially on a darker skin tone, sometimes people would have a problem with. But for me, I quite like it, and it allows me to be as expressive as I possibly can with some of the choices. So anyway, that's just an example of that. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is interesting, it's sort of an aside, but people have asked me quite a lot about that scene in regards to like how it was the flicker on purpose. The truth is, it was very difficult to get that flicker. We were using a small LED, and I don't think it was an ARRI product, so I don't feel bad saying this, but we almost broke it because we had to add a flicker box to it. And this is before, I think, now sky panels have all these like different programmable things, and we were able to do it differently then. But to get an LED to flicker was very hard for us, actually, at that moment. We're going to bring the camera up to just have a different perspective about things. Yeah. Another thing, like Moonlight, for example, is a really interesting topic of conversation. For some people, Moonlight is very blue. For some people, Moonlight is very desaturated. It's a great way to begin conversations and a great way to start to talk about what Moonlight or what anything means to you as a cinematographer, and how to sort of decide who we are as artists and how we express ourselves has everything to do with that. Yeah. But color, exactly. We have the backlight on. We have the other sky panel on back here, please. Thanks. Can we actually get the camera all the way to the wall? Because just as we're here, I thought we'd just try to talk a little bit about perspective. We're going to see off the set, which is going to be a little bit funny, but I thought we'd try to sort of see our main characters from over our bartender's shoulder. So come over here for a second, all the way to the edge, and look this way. Yeah. I thought we'd be here for a second just to show again like how I make choices in subjectivity. We have our focus again deep, but context is so crucial about how we tell stories, and I find that so oftentimes I'm doing this where I'm deep away from a subject conversation, but our focus is still continuing to be with our main character. Again, this is obvious, but just because I thought we're here, another example of what the LF does as well, where we really find ourselves paying attention to what's only sharp in the background and not in the foreground. Okay, and then now let's come back around to get a profile of our bartender, please.
Hey, sorry.
Oh, hi.
I have a couple of questions. I was just wondering on that last clip that you showed, if you had tested actually using like normal fluorescence?
Only fluorescence?
Yeah.
How do you mean? If you test it
I mean,
only?
to get that kind of flickering effect and obviously the green,
Yeah.
would it have been an option to use a real fluorescent light?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there was one. I mean, I think you actually see it in the opening frame. I think, and in the end, we wanted a bit more control over quality, and so I think I ended up turning that off. In fact, because it wasn't. I think the truth is, I think what it was that shot of that character Chiron is actually in slow motion. I think we're at 48, and that particular unit wasn't going to give us enough exposure, so we ended up turning it off and adding our own LED that gave us a little bit extra push. And so that's truthfully, I think, the only reason why we did that in that moment. And it's just another example, again, of speed. Like, I don't think Barry told me he wanted 48 until that moment, which happens quite a lot, I think, on set. You know, I think it's interesting. I know there's some directors in the room, too, and sometimes these ideas come out of nowhere, and you sort of are just reacting to a performance or to a moment. And then all of a sudden, you know, you ask the DP to make a quick adjustment. That wouldn't have been, you know, if I didn't have that LED ready for that moment, especially because like I'm not sure what other option might have been afforded to me, maybe a Kino, I suppose, but the room was so small that if I tried to find a way to like put a Fresnel in there or something bigger, I would have been totally stuck. And I wouldn't have been I would not have had the real estate to be able to do that. So, you know, again, just another example of LED stuff that kind of helps me quite a lot, especially working with, you know, directors who like to throw things out on the fly, which is important. But yeah.
And I was interested, I've obviously seen Moonlight, and I was interested in the scene on the beach.
Yeah.
And I actually used it for a bit of kind of inspiration for a scene that I was shooting recently, where we were in a big open space, and obviously I couldn't at night, and I couldn't light. I mean, it was a massive wheat field, so I was kind of trying to describe to the director how we didn't have the budget to light this entire area, and you know, and how that would affect the scene and how it would affect kind of the characters emotionally. And I think in Moonlight you kind of achieved that. It became a really intimate scene because of the pull of light.
Sure.
Was that how you were thinking about it?
I mean, it's tricky, right? I mean, like, you know, I'll say a few things about that. One is sort of, it's always my greatest fear when you read a script and the, you know, night exterior, there are no lights on. A dark, like, well, I don't know. So, but it's also the great freedom too, because it's a challenge, right? Then you get to invent it, and I think that's kind of what you're getting at a little bit too with Moonlight. Is like, that's definitely not a realistic version of a beach. Especially, you can definitely tell when you're behind the two characters and looking out. I mean, in theory, the ocean's back there. We could have been.
You can hear it.
You can hear it, which is again the power of movies a bit, right? But yeah, like, where's the ocean? It's not there. It's black. But you know, it does sort of help a little bit to sort of, you know, keep it subjective and keep the audience sort of focused on one thing. Sometimes I wonder, like, if there was a big VFX ocean back there that we put in later, you know, actually the truth is I think the scene might have lost a lot of quality to it and a lot of intimacy to it. I think we would have been distracted by like some gorgeous, beautiful, shiny, rippling waterways. And so, you know, sometimes you take, and going back to, I think, an earlier question about low-budget filmmaking, you know, sometimes these things can be an added advantage, and you don't know that until you're there a little bit. I mean, I think sometimes we struggle, oftentimes as cinematographers, to sort of, to keep pushing ourselves to, you know, I think I'll say I was guilty of this on Moonlight in that scene. I was pushing the producers to give me more and more and more and more lights to try to find ways to, like, I wanted to look down the beach, and my initial bid was like, you know, 5 more condors with a bunch of stuff on it where I could like shoot sort of, you know, overs and see depth. I mean, the secret of I mean, there's a few reasons why. Once, because we were very behind schedule, but the truth is, the camera in Moonlight, in that scene particularly, never actually moved, and we just moved the characters around the light. So all those overs, I mean, I never moved the camera, we just moved the characters around from one to the other, and, you know, different over the shoulders because A, we're behind schedule, B, I mean, I'm being exaggerated a little bit. We moved it slightly, but always the same axis, basically, because we couldn't afford to see down the beach. I mean, to the left of me and the right of me is pitch black. So, you know, again, going back to low-budget filmmaking, you sort of have to find ways to navigate that, of course. Anyway, yeah, but I know what you mean. It's tough. Anyone else want to chat? Go for it.
I was wondering, since you have such a stylistic, I guess, style with color and lighting, how involved are you with the color grade? And do you like using custom LUTs instead?
So the DI for me is a big deal. I love it. It's like a sort of a happy place for me. So I've been really, you know, it's been really important to me to make sure I was there. I was there for all the days on both Moonlight and Beale Street. And I don't know that I've ever missed a day on any DI, to be totally honest with you. I kind of really enjoy it, for one thing. And I also think it's really important for that continuity of vision to kind of continue through. So yeah, no, I mean, I think it's pretty clear in Moonlight, especially as an example of it. I hope you also see it now here with the teaser of Beale Street too. There's quite a lot of, no, it's interesting. I mean, like, I guess I'm not sure how to say it, but it's relatively affected. These are not like sort of out-the-box Rec 709 imagery. And so, you know, it's a little bit different between the two films. For example, on Moonlight, not only did we not have a LUT, I think we just recorded our dailies on the Samurai, I'm pretty sure, which is crazy. And I think they even cut off of those files, which is even crazier. So we just monitored Rec 709, and I got used to that latitude. I got really used to knowing sort of if I had enough information in my log file based on, you know, viewing. I could view both effortlessly, of course, with the user buttons on these cameras, which are great. But, you know, I think all we did was look at Rec on that movie. On Beale Street, it's a very different story because we had the ability to, you know, in the pre-production process, know who our colorist was, which is the same colorist as Moonlight, Alex Bickle, who's, you know, a good friend of mine and someone I think is really talented. He helped us develop a LUT, actually, in prep. And not to go on and on about it, but, you know, that LUT was actually developed via some, you know, reference photography from the 70s that we were all looking at, Barry Nye and the production designer and costume designer, and, you know, we sort of always sort of were responding to these certain sets of photos for some reason, and a lot of it had to do with a certain stock that was available at the time. And so Alex helped me develop this, and we used it every day on Beale Street. It was on the camera at all times, and I think we even went into the DI and used it there as well. So it sort of definitely had a great deal of kind of continuity. So very different processes in terms of how we got there, but I mean, I guess the specific answer to your question is it's a huge thing for me and a space that I really sort of value. There's something about the creative process that happens when you're at a click that maybe, this sounds a little funny, but I really kind of like also being a little out of control sometimes, where I'm not fully in control of, you know, camera movement or actor blocking, and there's something sort of a little loose to things. There's something that happens in that environment that I find very exciting and very sort of influential and inspiring. So, which is to say, sometimes things are not so precise. And I think that's also why I really enjoy the DI, because that's a space where I get to like really kind of have a bit more control and take moments that were happening quite effortlessly and quite sort of organically and sort of, you know, I guess one could call them fixed mistakes, or one can call them shape moments, and they're kind of the same thing. Anything else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Oh, hey, go ahead.
So, talking about LED lighting, do you think you can spend that time that you save with using LED lights, other than, I don't know, daylight fixtures and stuff, on the creative side, or do you like pack in more shots per day?
Yeah, I think it's all of that, obviously. It's hard to know what needs more time before you're sort of in the middle of it all. But I think absolutely, it's all of it. Whether it's another shot, whether it's another take for Barry or another director, whether it's a few minutes for like a prop to come in, like all of it adds up. You know, there's a lot that goes into filmmaking, clearly, and I think we all share that time. That's how I value it anyway. I don't just say that like, oh, you know, this LED technology and how fast it moves the set. I don't pitch that to a producer and AD and saying like, so that gives me more time to light. I think it gives more time to just the creative process at large. And so I'll say that. And I think rightfully so, directors will take the time you give them. And so if you give them 10 minutes because you needed the time to sort of technically get ahead of a challenge that you had created for yourself somehow in your lighting, they'll take 10 minutes. But if you can give them half an hour, they'll take half an hour. And I think that's totally appropriate, of course. I just think that it doesn't just help me, these lights, but it helps all of the filmmaking as a whole. And the entirety of the set can benefit by them, not just cinematographers. So, I think it's just a general question, or general answer that way. We should go back. Can we go wide again? Because I think I was doing a really bad job lighting this backdrop. I thought I would just sort of chat about that for a second. Let's go to the 28. Is that what it is? Yeah. 25? Yeah, thank you. Let's come back on way wide.
Somewhat related to lighting, but it's also more to do with your exposure with the camera. Are you doing any over or underexposing, or are you pretty level throughout the whole thing?
I think my process of choosing exposure is something like I definitely find a little bit more intuitive than saying, for example, I set my skin tone to be a stop under at a certain ARRI. I think for me, it has everything to do with, more broadly, the context by things are shot in. I was having a conversation last night with someone at a panel, which I thought was really interesting. He is someone who lights in ways in which he can sometimes light doing a close-up of someone. He'll light the close-up and sometimes put a black flag behind the character's head to specifically look only at the subject. And I found that to be fascinating because that would bother me to no end. I don't know that I could work that way, because for me, exposure has to do with so much about backgrounds and what's sort of the environment at large is sort of how I tend to do that, which maybe sounds like really silly, but it's the truth, to be honest with you. So I don't have like rules by which I underexpose by a stop or two stops or things like that. I tend to sort of do work in the lower levels, but I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's like more or less than anyone else does, to be honest with you. Sorry. Behind you.
Hi, I was wondering whether you approached lighting the skin tones differently in this film than Moonlight, particularly also with female leads and the fact that they had different kind of makeup.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you probably can tell that the movies do look quite different, I think, and I hope you feel the same. And for many reasons. I'm going to go on a little bit of it's a tangent for a second to say that this film, as you hopefully maybe you'll see in the future, while it being about a lot of different things, one of the main sort of, through lines or threads of the film is just the concept of love. And when I think about love, I think about romance, and I think about warmth, and I think about sort of like, just like romantic skin tones. And that was sort of how we came about with these sort of warmer colors that I think you sort of see in the lighting and in the palette overall. Moonlight is a very different movie with a very different sort of root systems, and the environment of that is also very, very different. I mean, when I think of Miami, which is where Moonlight is set, there's a lot of greens and a lot of blues in the environment. You're sort of in a very humid climate with a lot of reflective quality of skin because of how the perspiration works on people's faces. Well, whereas here we are in New York in the fall, and the environment is very, very different. The color palette's very different, and I think the choices we made as to why we were using a certain warmth in the lighting we were choosing, which, by the way, provided by LEDs, that sort of level of nuance in terms of like where we were on the Kelvin temperature, which was definitely not 32 or 56 ever. I never, for example, end up in those places. That I find myself always somewhere in the middle, whether it's 47 or 50, 52 or 37. I very rarely am at one or the other, which I find really interesting because for so long we were either using tungsten light or HMI. At least in my experience, that's kind of where I was at. Which sure you can gel, of course, as we all sort of know, but I find that like when I'm shooting independent film. You walk into a space, into a restaurant, into a home, and the light is coming through a window, which maybe has a bit of a blue cast or a green cast to the window, but then you're trying to sort of mimic that motivation with a different source to match, and that's terribly difficult. Or it's not terribly difficult. It's just complicated and adds, you bring your color meter out. Okay, let's see what gel I need to use to match to that thing. Whereas now it's like, okay, I can almost do it by eye, and I can do it with the gaffer at my side and just like adding a bit warmth, a bit of green, and things like that to sort of motivate. I'm sorry, not to motivate, but to match what I'm motivating from. That level of warmth that you see in this film and why it differentiates from Moonlight in specific has, I think, mostly to do with sort of the concepts of the film, the new film, Beale Street, being so much about love and things like that. And I think that was sort of the root of a lot of the choices in the film. Also to do with movement as well, too, but color-wise, that warmth, I think, had to do with sort of this sort of sorry, I'm going on and on, but going back to your moment a minute ago about sort of where we come from influencing choices. I think of family homes, and my family home of a warm space. It may not physically be that, but so I think of like lamplight, and I think of like lampshade colors, and I think you sort of see that very much in terms of skin tone in the film and how that was very influential for me in terms of the emotional quality I was trying to sort of project onto the movie. Anyone else? Any questions? Yeah.
So today we saw two films with predominantly black characters. I wanted to ask if you could speak to lighting darker skin tones and different types of dark and black skin and brown skin, and also if that affects your conversations with the production designer.
Maybe what you're alluding to is asking me like what works and what doesn't work. There are no rules, but what I find a technique that I use a lot when I'm lighting people with Barry's, in Barry's films is, you're looking for reflective qualities as opposed to pushing light on something. You're looking for something to reflect light back. So, when I'm lighting Trevante in Moonlight, or Ashton, they have quite a dark skin tone. And a technique that I use when lighting them is a lot of bounce and a lot of soft top light that can kind of carry a reflective quality, which is something I wouldn't do if it was a character that looked more like me. I think there's a different sort of, I would maybe push light more onto my skin, and I would bounce light more onto someone of color, It's more challenging to talk about like production design in that regard, because sometimes it's, like the scene you just watched a minute ago, that warm sort of yellowy green pastel wallpaper next to her, I thought just worked so well on her skin. But the truth is, I don't know that I knew that. I didn't even pick that wallpaper out, for example. I was a production designer. I don't know that I make choices, or Barry makes choices with that in mind. I think we're much more reactionary, going back to that kind of conversation. I'll just say, yeah, the way in which I usually approach lighting people of color is through like looking for reflectivity. And I think also too, like what's interesting in regards to that too is color, light color. And what I think is interesting and sort of more expressive is, I think if you look at Moonlight as an example, if you put like blue light on me or like super, super pink light on me, it probably looks pretty silly. And I don't know that it will look, genuine or truthful. People of color, I think, are it's like sometimes people talk about it as a difficulty and something to to work past to achieve a certain kind of exposure or stuff like that. I find it as a great opportunity, to be honest with you. I find myself in ways being able to be much more expressive and make much more colorful choices in ways if I was lighting an actor that had my skin tone, I may not be able to afford. So I find it as a real gift and a real sort of like pleasure working on films with Barry and with characters like in Moonlight or Beale Street Could Talk, more than a challenge, for sure.